So, welcome everyone to Carving a New Path. My name is Andrea Hyland. I'm the host of this show. This podcast, Carving a New Path, began in 2020 in response to all the change that people were experiencing, and the conversations and guests that I invited onto the podcast have all listened to their inner voice and birthed new ways of being in the world. And so I wanted to demonstrate that this is what it looks like. So today's show, episode 28, meet Jennifer Lynn Smith. She is an author of, I don't even know how many books. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But we're going to talk about writing and the novellas that she has written that are on Kindle Vella, which is a platform you may or may not be familiar with. And in the show page, I've got the link. It's a link tree that you can click on to go see the different novellas and to play with that. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, what's involved with actually accessing the platform. And before we start our conversation, I just want to tell you a couple of things about Jennifer, and I'll just read a bio here that I have for her. Jennifer Lynn Smith has always loved a good story, and from a young age, she was driven to write. Though life would present many hurdles and some pauses, the desire to write would never cease. Overcoming such obstacles would give rise to such creations that would never exist without them. In the past 9 years, she has published more than 80 individual pieces in literary journals and magazines, as well as 3 books of poetry. Recently, she has published 6 novellas using Amazon's Kindle Vella platform. And once she started publishing her first serial, Birth of the Gorgon, she was hooked and loved the format. She has since published 5 more novellas and plans many more in the future. So, welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so happy you're here. And I just want to highlight to the listeners that right there in the bio, you get a little taste about her prolific writing and her desire to write in different places and different platforms and different ways. And I just thought that although you tell us that from a young age you were driven to write, I thought we'd just start the conversation, Jennifer, by having you talk a little bit about how you started writing or what was the impulse to write. And so I'm going to be quiet and turn it over to you to share that.
Sure. Thank you, Andrea. Um, I found writing kind of naturally and by accident. As early as sixth grade, I was recognized. I would write in English class and turn in my work, and it really started then. For those 3 years in middle school, my work was sent for good reasons to the
Mhm.
principal's office as exemplary work. During this time, I'd also write. I call them song poems, but they were song lyrics. I have a book of, I think, 118 of those. I still have them. I'm going to put them in a novella eventually. So that's forthcoming, but I still have those after all those years in a trapper keeper, no less. Um, I would, as many writers, I'd struggle with, finding that good feedback and support. And I think my story is definitely one in which I forged my own path in support and validation versus, surrounding audience bolster me up. I quit writing, not long after I wrote my first novel when I was a freshman in high school. Because what you go do with, writing, you can't make a living out of it. College, I picked it up again, have a English degree with a creative writing specialization, and end up publishing my first work during that time. Um, and it was the second poem, the true poem I've actually ever written. And I did that in classes. I was trained in Iowa workshop style. of, presenting your work for that. Effectively, it was a minor, as they called it, specialization. And unfortunately, health issues would curtail my writing again, because it's like, okay, you got to be serious and you got to do something else. Long story short, fast forward to complete my master's in international relations, Russian studies, no less. I did a lot of work on Ukraine during that time as well. I would self-publish my master's thesis on the Russian involvement in the Syrian war. And from then, I dabbled into self-publishing. And after birth of my daughter, I got this, intense desire to write again. And I was going to take all my old work and just self-pub. And long story short, within 6 months of my daughter's being born, I decided to submit to literary journals and magazines. Long story short, that would give me the validation and feedback in which I would, publish through Politics and Prose in Washington, an independent bookstore, and then led me to Kindle Vella, which I've really, to me, have found my home. And I hope it'll be good home for some time to come. A year and a half ago, I published Birth of the Gorgon. It was based on Greek mythology, lover of Greek mythology. And I wrote that one. That work stemmed from a 2009 NaNoWriMo National Writing Month competition, which you're supposed to compose a book of 50,000 words at least in 30 days.
Mhm.
So from Birthday Gorgon, I just kind of continued on from that. And now I have 6 books on Kindle Vella right now. Hope to do more in the future.
I love that. And I want to talk about specifically some of the books. And before we do that, I just want to highlight for the listeners that one of the reasons I love to have conversations with writers and other different types of creative people is because you just showed the whole path in a very short, succinct way on how there, number one, you started writing and you had someone who liked your writing and that gave you support, gave you that positive feedback. And I think it's important as writers to understand that, you know, have some support, have some places for support where, I mean, treat your writing as you would a little baby and keep your baby safe.
Yeah.
So it's like, keep it to yourself and then know that you're only going to share it in places where you can get some, not just positive feedback, but encouragement to keep writing. Maybe someone who's able to say to you, I really like this and I want to know more about this versus, well, that sounds dumb, or why would you want to write that? Or, you know,
Exactly.
and so you even highlighted the fact that you found your own way of approving of your writing and so that self-support within. So I feel like both and are important. And the other thing is that you are it's like a classically trained musician. You are a classically trained writer who has found ways to uh like use the knowledge, and also you have carved a new path as to how you really want to write. And so there must have been a point where you decided that you weren't going to focus on the literary journals and you were going to write for the audience. I don't know. Could you speak a little bit to that kind of
Sure.
transition?
Sure. As I came from that background, like I said, my undergraduate was in English with specialization of creative writing. Genre writing at the time was not welcomed at all. You wrote mainstream literary fiction, and that's what you studied as well. The only difference between my creative writing classes and my English classes, English did more historical lit. So the farthest we went was probably the 1930s, 1940s,
Mhm.
maybe a little bit, get into 1960s, but really the creative writing classes, they focused on craft and an era probably slightly overlapping that, maybe the 50s and 60s and present, but very two distinct ways of looking at lit. But both of them agreed you have this narrow path to pursue, and that is literary nonfiction. You can't get too much into sci-fi, you can't get too much into romance, you can't do a lot of different things. You deal with the world at the present, no fiction, worlds of creation, none of that. And for many years, I went in that realm. And even when I had my comeback after my daughter was born, I started submitting to literary journals and magazines. I decided I didn't necessarily like the ones that were straight literary,
Mhm.
the ones that a lot of people would say top tier and are very highly rated, and bless them. They're really great, a lot of them. And they're all academically backed, many of them through creative writing programs. So a lot of times they publish their own. At that time, I decided to forego the MFA,
Mhm.
and I got an MA in international relations, as I referenced earlier. So I had done academic writing as well. Did the citations, did the research and all that in a very different discipline. When I came back to writing, although I did start in many of the literary journals and magazines, I wanted to be read. And this is no shade, this is not intended shade to me literary journals and magazines, but they have a very narrow audience.
Mhm.
And many of them are kind of self-contained, the MFA community. And I didn't, even though I came from academia, and I work in higher ed right now,
Mhm.
in a different capacity as an administrator, it didn't feel right, and it felt kind of confining to me.
Mhm.
So I started looking at self-publishing. I did my 3 works of poetry, including the forerunner of the Gorgon, which is Medusa the Lost Daughter. I published that.
Mhm.
Published 2 other ones, many of them which contained works that were published in these literary magazines and journals, like Cast Out Eden, for instance. I think 26 or 27 of them were published elsewhere, and
Mhm.
this was just a compilation. And when I enjoyed publishing, but it did take a lot of time, submitting out, hundreds of submissions. And sometimes you got 5%, 5 to 10% acceptance rate, which is actually pretty good, but
Mhm.
it was very tedious. And I didn't find that I was getting the feedback from the readers. So enter like Kindle Vella, it came at a time that I was looking at a different path in which I wanted to get my product. Literally, if you think of it as a baby product, you
Mhm.
want to show it off.
Yeah.
And it took me forever. It actually launched in April 2021, the platform. And
Mhm.
I did not get on there until I think I published the first episode of Gorgon in late July of last year.
Mhm.
And I sat on the sidelines for a while, and I thought about it. I thought about it. I had looked at serial fiction before, but I didn't think it would go over. Leading Lights, which is one that I just started publishing, I kind of crafted with the idea of epibits,
Mhm.
kind of episodes, and I didn't find a market for it outside just publishing on my website. And if you publish on your website, well, that's no longer publishable. So when
Mhm.
I saw Kindle Vella, I was like, I'm going to try this. And Gorgon was the first one that I used because it was one that I had ready. And I published that, and it is it is very much a new experimental platform, but it is rooted in literary history. This is how Charles Dickens famously published. It's just something that came out of fashion with the decline of newspapers, but this
So
used
just
to happen.
tell the audience about that Dickens published, say a few words about that for anyone who
Yes.
doesn't know how his work was published.
Yes, I love Dickens. I enjoyed 19th century Victorian lit. That was kind of my area when I studied English literature, and Dickens was one of my favorites. So he would publish in serials. So you had the weekly paper, and he would have a snippet. I don't know exactly the parameters, but he have a snippet. If you can imagine the old-fashioned episode in the weekly newspaper, and everyone was waiting for it. This was
Mhm.
entertainment back then. Of
Uh-huh.
course, people would put this in a book eventually, but you got to remember this is how the masses were able to afford a book, because this was just pillions or shillings at a time. It's not going to cost them very much, and a lot of times they would gather together to read, because some people are better readers than others, and you often have a reader.
Mhm.
And later, I mean, a lot of this was done over radio too, because they did this on radio. But Dickens was famous, and I remember some of the notes in the actual books, the Penguin books or whatever they were, and that he had to rush to the printers because he couldn't remember a detail of the last serial that he published, and he
Mhm.
had to run down to the printers. Remember, these are hardcore printing presses. This is nothing like what we do nowadays, a hit submit. He had to go down there and say, okay, what was the last episode, whatever. And that's how he edited. Of course, it became a book eventually, but you ever look at Dickens' work, I encourage you to look at Great Expectations. I believe that one is somewhere around five or so hundred pages. That is a lot of episodes. Uh,
Mhm.
and this is how 19th century lit was actually published.
Yeah,
So Amazon brought it back, you know.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, although we're not going to go into a lot of details about the actual, like, starting Kindle Vella and how to upload your work and all of that, what we are going to talk about are two or three of the novellas that you have already published on Kindle Vella. And let's approach it as a writer. Um, okay, pick one. Which one do you want to start with?
I think we have to start with Birth of the Gorgon, because that
Okay.
was the first, because that was my experiment. Okay. Because it was written traditionally with chapters. Okay. And this is a active debate on novella. A novella, and do you continue them as chapters, or do you make them in smaller bits?
Mhm.
Me, I have done both, written them as I go along, with no preset amount of words already. And I've also done what I call preloaded, which is Gorgon. I already had the work, it's like 61,000 words when I started. And I had to look at arcs. Okay, what can I get these people to turn the page, so to speak, and turn the page where it is how it is in Kindle Vella, is that for them to purchase a nurse set of tokens, which is a minimum amount of tokens for them to quote unquote turn the page. So yes, while I could, post them as chapters, I looked at it, it was like, what, in say the first chapter, it was probably the only one, and it's the intro that is actually standalone as it is in the original work. And I just published it like so. Because the arc, you have that first opening scene with Medusa on Sarpedon. She's been, on the island, exiled for 16 years, and she gets the visitor. Eventually you'll know who that visitor is, but it sets up the work, and it's perfect as an arc to, okay, if you want to read more, go to the next set of tokens. It's almost like a page turn, but turning pages on Vella is a little bit different than the traditional methods in that you're not thinking pages, you're thinking blocks of text. So whether that's 600 words or the max is 5,000. And a lot of times people are reading on these things. So you
Mm,
got to be mindful of that too. So if
yeah.
you put a chunker of 4,800 words, they're going to be scrolling, scrolling, scrolling.
So
So
you're talking about reading it on your phone for anyone who's listening and not seeing the visual that's here.
yes,
Yeah. So let's just pause for a minute and talk about the tokens, because part of this going and reading on Kindle Vella is getting used to it being a different system. So I know, for
yes,
instance, Birth of the Gorgon has 52 episodes.
yes,
So what we might call a chapter in a book, these are called episodes.
yes,
And when they go there, the first 3 episodes are free to read, right?
correct, correct.
So, and I just recently started reading on Kindle Vella. And so when I finished my first 3 episodes, they then gave me, I think it was 200 tokens.
Yes,
And then each episode, you use your tokens to do that. And
correct.
then, yeah, and because things are always changing, I would just say I would go look at how much do tokens cost, because I mean, prices change with everything. I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
It's
Um,
it's interesting you mentioned the cost because recently I was at a bookstore, Barnes and Noble, and I was looking at how much paperbacks cost,
uh-huh.
from the big publishers. And and I saw that some of them were up towards $17
Mm-hmm.
for a paperback. And even the mini ones for like romance are pushing like $9.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to thinking, it's like, how economical is Kindle Vella on the consumer side? Today, someone happened to purchase like 71 episodes of There Are No Accidents. So they read through. And I saw how much it cost because I get like 50% of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that and I was doing the math in my head, and I would actually have to comp this out, but I think it would cost like $6 or $7 for There Are No Accidents to
Mm-hmm.
actually read it all through. Because that person still had about another 30, yeah, 30 episodes to go, because it's
Mm-hmm.
at 97. So they had roughly just under 30. And I was looking at that and how much it cost them, and it's like, actually, it's cheaper
Mm-hmm.
than it really depends on the type of work. But for like There Are No Accidents, yeah, it's be like $6 or $7, which is a bargain.
Uh-huh.
Someone say, well, what about Kindle, regular Kindle? And it's like, well, fair enough. You could get some of them for $2.99. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
But you're also outlaying the cash right then and there versus doing it piecemeal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you were going to get it on the shelf, it would cost 3 times as much.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I started looking at that, it's like, you know what? Why do I want to have my consumers paying so much?
Mm-hmm.
For my book. Would I want them to spend $17?
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, I probably will put them in, on regular Kindle, but I certainly wouldn't put it that high. But that's the amount of control as a self-publishing artist that you have, in that you have little middleman in between,
Mm-hmm.
and you control a lot of the processes. You got to think that $17 book that came from one of the big houses, and forgive me, I don't even remember what house it came from, publishing house. It has so many middlemans, to go through, including Barnes and Noble that
Mm-hmm.
sold it, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So, when I started looking at that, I really liked it even more, because it's like, well, I can present my work for half as much and still get paid.
Mm-hmm.
because I'm
Mm-hmm.
still getting paid.
Yeah.
And they still have the opportunity to even, like you said, browse the first three chapters.
Mm-hmm.
And for that matter, they can get six in and they decide, it's not for them. I would hate for that to happen, but
Yeah. Right. Right.
they're not as invested,
Yeah.
So there's a lot of consumer control too with this.
So
I
I would
actually,
encourage people, if you're interested in it, just either as a reader or a writer, is to go and, click on Jennifer's link tree here in the show description and just read some of it. You're going to have a chance to read some of it for free and just check it out as a way to do it. And something I really appreciate about the way that I've learned about this from you, Jennifer, is that there are times where as a writer, I want to write. I have an idea. I have things that I want to put out there. And because there's the freedom to then take that work and publish it in other ways, it feels like a great platform for creating something.
it
And whether
does.
you're like getting clearer, because here's the thing, if you're if for every episode you're becoming conscious of the arc that would lead a reader to the next chapter, that's actually helping you with your writing of
Yes,
story, helping you with the writing of your book. So it feels like a good platform for also developing your writing.
yes, it is. I mean, on Gorgon, it makes you look at even longer pieces and it's like, where's the action really happening? When
Mm-hmm.
you're composing, say there are no accidents, um, which is actually ironically my bestseller right now. When you're composing that, I did that. I may have written maybe 3 to 5 episodes ahead of time, but I was pretty much doing it as a true serial. In which,
Mm-hmm.
writing them as to go. And for them to turn that page, you have to have an arc every single time. So I think the most I had on that one was 1,000 word episodes. And you got to keep the action going. You got to. And with Gorgon, you have to decide where the action was and, decide where you're curtailing it for the episode. So it's very different ways of looking at it. And when you read Vella's, I've read, oh gosh, hundreds now. I read them myself. And
Mm-hmm.
there are some that you can tell someone just put them pretty much chapter wise in it. And it doesn't exactly lend itself to the format as much as someone who is more cognizant of those, arcs. And there are probably some writing that is better for this format than others. I have seen people do poetry, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
shorter poetry at that, which does not make the 600 word cutoff. So a lot of times they have to have two, maybe even three poems in a episode. I've seen cookbooks.
Mm-hmm.
If it's something that you're really interested in, say, especially in the last example, recipes, yeah, I can definitely see where you pause on that. But maybe those works or those types of works aren't naturally lending themselves to Villa versus, something that's a ongoing saga in which you have a long drawn out plot line and you need to pull the reader through. Because
Mm-hmm.
Vella, you have to keep pulling the reader through. You do that in traditional fiction as well, obviously, but I think it's more immediate with Vella because you do have to give them a reason to purchase the next set of tokens. What's the
Mm-hmm.
payoff? As one of my earlier writer teachers taught me, what's the payoff?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
So There Are No Accidents is complete as a series. There's
Yes,
97 episodes, and that's your most popular one,
yes,
right? And it's in the genre of romance or
yes,
yes? Okay.
yes.
And then,
So
yeah. I was
Yes.
going to ask you about the fleeting lights because that was the other one we were talking about. That's that you've written. Yes, and there are only 10 episodes there so far. So how often do you release an episode?
So I kind of preloaded because I'm on break from the university. So I
Uh,
kind of preloaded it. It did debut the 12th of this month. So I did preload it. I also have Seasons of Maxine, which is also publishing at this time too. So what my week is probably going to look like in the new year is Fleeting Lights will probably get published either Monday or Wednesday.
mhm.
And probably Maxine has always been usually Friday. So
Okay.
what I'll probably end up doing in Gephyrophobia, I also have that one. It
Mhm.
will probably be most likely whatever dates in the middle
Mhm.
that I can squirrel away. A lot of times I'll have a hot one that I'm continuously publishing on, a middle, and then I put one in the background.
Mhm.
Um, so far I've had two at a time. This is experiment with three, which is why I hit Fleeting Lights so heavy, because Fleeting Lights is going to be another 100 episode one. I can feel it. I haven't broken up all of it yet, but
Mhm.
that one is kind of my baby. So it's an interesting segue from Greek mythology, which I have a great love Greek mythology. So you had Birth of the Gorgon, and I have book two editing right now. So
Mhm.
far it's called Athena's Vengeance, but it's not ready yet. I
Mhm.
had Season of Holly, which was a Christmas story, and Clifton Heights series, which Season of Maxine is part two.
Mhm.
Um, there Are No Accidents, which is a complete one as well. It's a college romance,
Mhm.
and it centers on an older graduate student who's gone back to school and to complete her doctoral studies after a divorce. She's a single mother with two kids.
Mhm.
And her finding her footing not only through her doctoral studies, but also love again, trusting again. Leading
Mhm.
Lights it is a romance, but it's also um it is a romance as well as an empowerment story. This
Mhm.
story is the one I thought of, perfect for episodes, because that's why I kind of thought of it as years ago when I started writing it. It is set in Alaska. It follows the story Emma, and she has found that her marriage is in trouble. It's in shambles. The life that she has lived is not really what it truly is. It's a lot of things going on. I don't want to get reveal too much of the plot, but there's a discovery she has that kind of shakes her world, and it really makes her, as a young woman approaching 30, reevaluate her life and what she wants and uh, where she thinks it should be. And that one is preloaded. It is written. It's over 100,000 words.
Mhm.
So that one I will be editing it maybe slightly, and putting it in episode form, but it's pretty much done as is, with maybe a couple of tweaks in there. Um, there Are No Accidents was written just on the fly. I had no idea it was going to go 97
Mhm.
episodes. A subplot made it a lot longer than I thought it'd be, but
Uh-huh.
as a writer, you sometimes discover that. Uh, but that one actually surprised me. And that one, I had to put it on a back burner for a while because I was, doing some schooling myself, and I came back and it's like, no, I want to write and I want to finish this one. And that one was finished up from, like, I don't know, 15, 16 episodes to 97 in about 3 months.
Mhm. Mhm.
I
Mhm.
even published 37 in 1 month alone. So you could see the
Yeah.
backbreaking schedule. But often people publish once a week on a lot of the serials. you will get a little bit panicked like I did with There Are No Accidents when someone catches up with you and you're like, you caught up. Oh my. Okay, okay, it's for real. So you feel like you're writing just for that
Right,
reader
right, right.
because you feel it and it's like, oh no. But it's pretty cool at the same time. You got comments, so you hear feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Um, live feedback. So Bella allows for them to leave comments. They can participate in your polls, and a lot of them do. And you find out a lot about your reader, what
Mm-hmm.
they're thinking about, which is
Yeah.
really
So
cool.
if anyone's listening who you're a reader and you don't intend to write, just know that the comments make a difference
Yes, I read them.
for the writer to hear what is what you appreciate about the story or what you are yeah, like what where it's feedback and it's well received to read the feedback. And I guess that I was stumbling there for a minute because I wanted to say um be kind. There's a way of also giving feedback to writers. Just know that writers are pouring their hearts and souls
Yes,
out. And so I would say instead of criticizing something, I would just write, what is it you want more of? You
yes,
know, what would you like to know more about? Or to say, I didn't want the story to go that way.
yes,
I mean, that happens when you're reading a book or, and I feel like that's fair to be able to
yes.
say, I wanted it to go in a different way. Okay, who knows? Maybe that will impact the story.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
and you still have time. So, even if you preload like I do, I probably won't preload more than 5 episodes, say of Fleeing Lights at the same time, because I want to take my time. And if I do get feedback and someone's like, why did Nathan did this or this doesn't make sense, I can go back. And that's the beauty of Kindle Villa too. You can go back and edit those episodes.
Mm-hmm.
So even if, you had to change something, it's like, you know what, they're right. I want to tweak this
Mhm.
or insert something in episode 2 that makes a little bit more sense. You can do that, you know.
Yeah, that's
It's
that's
it's like a
interesting.
workshop.
Yeah, being able to impact the writer and all of that.
Yeah.
Um, so something I just thought as we kind of wrap up our conversation today is you something that you and I've talked about is that there are times where life takes over. You know,
Mhm.
you
Certainly.
have a lot of work that's going on, or there's a family, whatever, something happening in your family where it's either a big celebration that's coming up or someone's ill,
Hmm.
different things can kind of pause the writing, places where you
Yes.
pause the writing. Something else I know about you, Jennifer, so I just want to have you share a few thoughts about this. How many times have you done the National Novel
Ooh.
writing?
Um, I have probably done it, I want to say 4 or 5 times.
Okay, so for anyone who doesn't know what this is, it's called NaNoWriMo, I
Mhm.
think it's National Novel Writing Month. It
Yes.
happens every November, and it's a way of disciplining. It's a discipline,
Yes.
really, to write every day. How many words a day?
It's if you actually average it, it's 1,666.
Okay, so that every day for 30 days to get 50,000 words by the end of that month.
Mm-hmm.
And so this idea of writing, it's like creating something that puts you in the zone of
Yeah,
writing. And that's like an incredible practice of
it
doing
is.
that. And I can see how by doing that, it's actually prepared you for juggling three different novellas at a time where you're
Yes.
developing them. And because you were talking about preloading it, if you like maybe you're on a roll with one of them and you get a couple of episodes completed and you upload those and then turn your attention to another one. I don't know. How do you balance three different stories?
It is a little bit of a juggling act. I will say this also for NaNoWriMo, if I'm not mistaken, they still do one in April too. They call it Camp Rimo. So
Oh, okay.
if you
Okay.
want to look at that, someone who's thinking ahead, you can definitely do that or create your own.
Hmm.
You can definitely do that. But Fleeting Lights and Gorgon started in NaNoWriMos. So Fleeting Lights, especially the core of it. Now, obviously, it's 100,000 words. I wrote more, but I think I clocked in about 60,000 in that NaNoWriMo. So you silence the critic and you just write because you don't have time to, say, oh, should I start it a different? No, no, you just throw it down. You just throw it
Right.
down. You
And
just
you
do.
edit later. Edit
Yeah,
later.
you
Uh-huh.
edit in December, or if you do the April, do it in May, edit
Hmm.
later. But usually I have balanced two at a time. So I did have to, unfortunately, when I was taking my class, I had to put a lot of it on back burner. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to focus more on my writing. I was in a graduate certificate program, but for once I've decided it's like, no, I'm gonna focus on my writing and I'm
Hmm.
just gonna keep
Hmm.
focused on writing. So I
Yeah.
ended up not only having there are no accidents. I came and started writing that heavily in July of this year, but I was also writing seasons of Maxine. So I
Hmm.
started up on that. So typically what you do with at least the two, preloading helps. So if you will like take a Monday and you can write 2 or 3 episodes of say Maxine, you have it preloaded, you edit maybe Wednesday or so, and you have, that week's episode, maybe then two more already scheduled for the consecutive Fridays. So that
Okay.
helps.
Hmm.
There are no accidents. That one I hit heavy. I was doing like 1 or 2 episodes a day because that
Wow.
1 month of October, I did 37. So you can do the math.
Hmm.
Um, with three, what I'll most likely do is preload enough leading lights. So I have it for next month or so,
Hmm.
decide, and I haven't decided yet what day exactly I want leading lights to be on. And a lot of Vella writers do this. They'll set dates, days of the week, and they'll
Hmm.
put on their link tree, I publish on Wednesdays or something
Hmm.
like this.
Hmm. Sure.
So that's probably what I end up doing. And probably Tuesday, Thursday will be writing days, pure
Hmm.
writing days. And probably on the weekends, I don't have my daughter,
Hmm.
to be
Hmm.
honest. And, Monday, Wednesday, Friday will actually be the publishing schedule. But you
Hmm.
got to remember also, they're not all at the same point. So you have like Maxine that I just published 25th episode. That one will probably clock in about 50 episodes.
Hmm.
So I'm about a halfway point. Fleeing Lights is going to be there for a while.
Hmm.
And Gephrophobia is kind of my baby right now. So it's
Hmm.
a slower start. So
Yep.
it probably helps if you have all of them at a different point.
Hmm.
Because if you have a high intensity one, pick one that's a large part of your focus, and that's going to be a higher intensity one that you're going to bring it home. Because you know how it gets about 3/4 of the way in, you start getting all the action, you have to start tying up ends, and you really want to focus on it. I do recommend notes. That's something I didn't do in the beginning, but make copious notes on, facts, ages, places they graduated, whatever
Hmm.
you need. Make
Hmm.
sure you make copious notes because you have a couple serials going. You'll be like Dickens and running into the printing press. And
Right.
yes, I've done that. Yes, I've done that. It's
That's
like,
so funny. I was watching a television series, and all of a sudden, for one of the characters, they had a 30th birthday party. And I was like, how did she get to be 30? She's like, it doesn't make sense according to the ages of the siblings and there was a point where they then brought her back to age 23 or something
oh,
in the series. So it was just like, oh, come on.
yeah,
You
you don't want to do jumps like that. And this is a confession, but I'm being transparent here. I
know?
actually accidentally renamed one of the kids. And for
Uh-huh.
about 3 episodes, he had a different name,
Uh-huh.
and I caught myself and I was like, "Wait a minute," and I had to go back. You had to
Mhm.
go back and it's like, "Oh," and
Yeah,
he was a
yeah.
minor character in this one, and,
But it can be so distracting as a reader. I felt so
yes,
distracted watching this thing. I
yes,
was like, there's no way she's 30. Why is she 30? Why not just throw a different year birthday party for her? It was just,
yes,
it's very distracting for
and
your
you're
reader.
wondering how that happened, and you're wondering, it's like, did they just forget?
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
And it's like, but none of the other kids aged
It's like
7
soap
years.
operas.
Right. It was just like, no, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Listen, I have loved this conversation so much with you, and I know that we're like out of time here. So I just wanted to circle back and first of all, I want to say to the listeners, this is an example of someone who's really passionate about writing and who has found a place to put her words and to create with. And so just as Jennifer was saying throughout, it's not about saying that literary journals are not a good place to write
Yeah.
or other articles or other platforms. It's just that this is what she's doing right now. And
Yeah.
this, and so both and it's like, so actually, if anything, I would say expand your mind about where you want to put your
Yeah.
writing and how to publish it and get it out into the world. So is there anything that you want to just wrap up the our conversation with to say to the readers or writers?
I'm just thankful to have this opportunity. I'll admit, it is still experimental platform, and I am glad I took the leap. Like I said, I think for me, it's more akin to my writing,
Mhm.
versus nothing wrong with literature. So you can look and see I published tons in them. It's just with my jump, it just felt home. And that's for a
Mhm.
writer, I think that's an important lesson for you to figure out for yourself is where is your writing most comfortable and at home with.
Mhm.
And for me, it was getting the product to the readers and getting them to enjoy it. And if I make a little money on the side, hey, great.
Mhm.
But, in all, I wanted people to read it and say, hey, what do you think?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And I get thrilled. It's like Christmas, opening presents when, someone is like, oh, I like that scene. Someone complimented Leading Lights and they're like, I love the
Uh,
description. It made me felt like I was there. I was like, you just like gushing because you done your job and you feel, rewarded by that. But I just, am thankful for the opportunity to talk to you
hmm.
and, anyone who reads, if you want to contact me, definitely contact me. Writers love that, so feel free and, let me know what you think.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. And thanks to
Thank
everyone
you.
who came and listened to our conversation. And click on the link, go on over and um, read a couple of episodes and see what you think. Leave a comment and all that. So thank you, Jennifer,
Thank
and
you.
bye bye now, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Mm.